Thank you all for joining us today for a discussion on what's new in ReadyAPI 2.3, which we released last week. So today's presenters are Gail Schlansky and Mike Giller. Gail is the Director of Products here at SmartBear, and Mike is one of our product owners. Before we get started, we're just going to run a couple of quick poll questions. So let me launch this here.
Thank you.
And so the first question is, what version of ReadyAPI are you currently using? 2.3, 2.2, 2.1, or 2.0 or earlier? So I'll just give people just a couple of minutes or seconds here to answer this.
Hoping they're on 2.3.
It will be after this.
Absolutely.
Yep. If you're not on 2.3 yet, the purpose of this session is to convince you to go and download 2.3. I can also post the link to that in a minute as well. All right. So let's see. So there's our results.
Ah.
Looks like
Gee.
still.
I want to know about that
2.2.
2.0 earlier people. That's good to see. Although, you know, you guys got to see that in product message come up. I can't believe you're ignoring it and not upgrading.
All right.
We always tell people internally that everyone upgrades really, really quickly. You're making liars out of us.
And one final poll question is, which modules of ReadyAPI do you use? And you can select multiple here. So SoapUI, LoadUI, ServiceV, Secure, and hopefully no one selects none.
But it's possible.
But it's certainly possible.
That means that they're interested and they want to go to ReadyAPI.
All right, I'll give this 5 more seconds. Thanks to everyone who's voting. And there's our results.
100%. So some are using the other ones. Good. Secure. Good. Good. Glad to see that. And, you know, when you have a license for SoapUI, you also can use Secure with that same license. So you don't even have to do anything special. It's there for the taking. Go ahead.
Awesome. All right. Well, so with that, I'll kick it over to Gail and Mike to walk us through the slides today.
Okay, great. Thanks, PJ. So a little bit of introduction. I'm Gail Schlansky. I'm the Director of Products here. Specifically, I cover all of ReadyAPI as a product manager. And I'm here with
Mike Giller. So I'm product owner. I guess right now, unofficially also for all of ReadyAPI. There's a lot of work to do. So
right.
A lot of responsibilities to share.
There's plenty to go around. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through really all of the new features. There's a lot here. Mike's going to show you some of it. We're going to talk through all of it. And there's more information online. So I encourage you to take a look at anything you want to find out more about. And we'll give you a little bit of backstories if we can think of anything interesting to tell you. But we'll share with you sort of our, you know, what drove us to do the things that we're doing. So as you know, ReadyAPI is very feature rich. And one of the things that we have learned or we know is that while it does so much for the power users, it's a little bit more difficult for new users to get started. So what we did was we focused our attention on helping new users get going. So if you have people in your enterprise, in your company, or you know people who are just going to get started using ReadyAPI, I encourage you to show them 2.3. What we did, and this is a trial, snapshot of a trial, but what we've changed in this is that when you open up ReadyAPI, we were showing you the dashboard since I think 2.2, but instead what we're going to be doing is showing you the SoapUI, if that's what you license. We'll go directly to SoapUI start page. That's what we call our start page. And on the start page, it has a real quick way to do create a test. You can create a test from an API definition or create a test from a URL. You don't have to go into the normal screens to create tests. You can create it right from here. This actual functionality is also embedded in file. So if you go to the left drop down, the file new functional test is the same thing basically as what we brought out in the start page. I don't know if that was confusing. So if you go into each of those, it's really easy to create a test. Gets you right through to the end. You can then run your test. You can see the results, all that good stuff. We also added some quick videos, and the videos are going to help people get started if they're starting and they want to create their first SOAP test, or they want to create the first REST test, or they are coming from open source. A lot of people are coming from open source and starting to use ReadyAPI. We wanted to share with them what's changed and what's different, so they have a better sense of what they are in front of. And then lastly, the other area that we want to show you is we have a quick tour. And the quick tour is actually embedded right into the product. So it walks a user through the process of creating a test from right within ReadyAPI. It gives a little description of the different components, the different parts of the page, and it makes it easier. It helps you learn about how to go about creating a test step by step. And at the end, it actually leaves the user with that sample test in ReadyAPI, so they can continue to enhance it or change it or whatever they want from that point on. So so this new release includes this new start page. Actually, we have a new start page for SoapUI, Secure, LoadUI, and ServiceV. And they all include this ability to easily get access to creating the first test, and then videos for them as well. Oh, and if you were a user that was used the recent projects that were, it's not just recent projects, could have been a recent test, but if you were a user that used that, on the right bar, you can see we've pulled out the same assets that we had on the old start page, and we just put them we put them on the right, so they're easy to access from there. Okay, with that.
Yeah, hopefully this helps. Hopefully this helps some other members on the team to onboard as well if they're just getting started with ReadyAPI. So another thing that we've really heard is support for Git branches. So as you can see here, we're showing some additional work that we've done. The biggest feature around support of Git branches is being able to actually switch branches. So before we kind of were only able to work with just the master branch, which was limiting because people want to fork, people want to provide different branches, different versions of the code with different versions of the test associated with that code, etc. So now we have the additional functionality within ReadyAPI to enable you to do that. Candidly, because of a snowstorm, I haven't had a chance to really set up a Git repository. You can see the options here. So it's they should be fairly intuitive if you know Git commands to commit, revert, update. The switch branches, the important ones, you'll be able to switch branches real time. Behind the scenes, we've also done some additional things to help you minimize conflicts. So hopefully you already know about composite projects. So you should be using the composite project because behind the scenes, it's going to break one single file that's responsible for all of your tests, all of your interfaces, every single config. And it's going to break out every single test asset into a separate file. So for example, I can work on SOAP tests, Gail can work on REST tests. And if we're using a composite project, then those are separate files that are not in conflict. We've also done some stuff behind the scenes where we actually, we don't change the IDs. If all you did is just open the project, run it. In the previous version, we changed some IDs so a commit would actually see a difference, and it wasn't the most obvious things when you look at a file.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've done for the past couple releases is that we used to save always, whether or not anything changed, and we've been peeling away that, and we only save if there's changes. Right. So you'll find that there's a lot more stability in the back end,
right?
Because we're not saving.
And even if you manually make changes, so for example, if you go from item 1 to item 2 just for testing purposes, at a project level in the latest version 2.3, we actually have a project property to not save these properties. So this will actually revert any change that I make to a value in a parameter on save. So there's a lot of, and I forgot the most important thing. So, and in preferences, this is now checked by default. If you're upgrading from previous versions 2.1 or earlier, please remember this preference, because if you're using this for Git, it's going to be very important. So I believe it is on the WSDL tab. Pretty print project files is now checked for every fresh installation. So when we were talking about separate files, previously it was one big long line containing all the XML configurations in the project file, which didn't make it for an easy diff when you're doing a git commit. So just being able to pretty print our project files on save, on commit, on edits, on updates will make your revision history and will make your commits a lot easier to do. So short of it, we're trying to minimize any kind of merge conflicts. We're trying to break out your project into an easy to understand composite project to for everyday use. We're trying to pretty print it so that it's easier to do a diff and to visually see exactly what changed. And we're giving you some additional tools to not see kind of false positive changes when really nothing changed behind the scenes.
Exactly.
So hopefully you're excited about this. I know a lot of people were asking about this. So some other things that we've done is we supported new technologies and features. So for over a decade now, we work with APIs, and APIs are constantly evolving. So some of the things that we've done is actually it's related to security. So one big thing that we realized was missing was support for proxy, for SOX proxy. So previously, when you configure proxy settings, so that would be in preferences proxy tab, you could do manual HTTP settings. So that way, if you were, behind a firewall and you needed to specify very specific proxy settings, you could do that for HTTP settings. For very, very secure internal APIs, which are actually fairly common, you would have to set up a tunnel, keep the tunnel running, pipe your HTTP through the tunnel, etc. It was a lot of setup using a lot of external tools. What we now support is SOX version 4 and version 5 of proxy behind the scenes. So now you can just configure it. So this eliminates the need for external tools. If you're automating, if you're building, your test execution within your pipeline, this should help you a lot as well for testing, for automatically testing the private APIs that are typically hidden behind the tunnel. So hopefully this feature, if it applies to you, you'll see great benefit in there. Along the same themes of security, SSL, HTTPS, is becoming more and more prominent. I think there's been news where Chrome is basically, marking every HTTP site as insecure. So we're going to see a lot more SSL encryption, a lot more HTTPS encryption. And again, we've kind of supported HTTPS through SSL encryption before. So in preferences, there's an SSL property where you could provide an extracted key store password, say it does require client authentication. In Windows, you actually have some certificates already kind of embedded as part of your profile. So simply checking this option saying use the certificate store in my Windows certificate store will enable you to access some HTTPS endpoints without that additional config, and will pick up your certificates as they change as part of your Windows configuration. Okay. We've also added tags for test suites. So this is something that will help you filter out and sort out really, really large projects.
It's actually really great for all sorts of workflows and things like that if you're using command line interface.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's lots of great places that the tags can be used. If you're not using them, we've seen some really power users go crazy with them.
Yeah, and we've had this for quite a while, actually, with good amount of success, where you were able to tag different test cases. So you could always, create a new tag for, say, module 1. And this is the beauty of tags, is you can tag them for whatever purposes. So for example, this test can apply for module 1, and it can be a regression test, right? The next one could be module 3. Oops. Actually, let's keep it to module 1, and this one can be a smoke test. So you can use tags to classify things by whatever you want. And we've done this, as you can see, for quite a while for test cases. If you now have test suites, and I only had one, so let me very quickly create a second one, you can now have the same level of access of assigning different tags to different test suites. And then later on, either in your GUI or during execution, you'll be able to filter what you want to run by tags. So that allows you to group things in a very flexible way, where you can have, certain grouping of smoke tests, certain grouping of regression tests, certain grouping specific to a module, certain grouping specific to an integration. Whatever your business use case is, these tags will give you the flexibility to group things in the right order. Okay. And the final thing in this specific slide is we also going on the theme of security. We're also providing support for custom security settings of JDBC connections. So I know this is highlighted in some of our documentation, but when you create some JDBC settings, so you can create a database connection, there are some additional properties you can now do for security. I need to double check exactly what driver this is for. But again, if you've ever encountered kind of a blocker where you needed to provide some certificates, some security configuration for your JDBC connections, we'll support it now.
Yeah, it's a bunch of properties now that we support that didn't have before. So you can have more configuration of those connections, better configuration of those connections.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, moving on to licensing improvements. I'm a licensing person, for better or for worse. So we have a new version of the licensing server that's out there. There's a number of improvements in it, mostly for floating licenses. If you haven't upgraded your license server, if you're using a floating license server, please do. There's a number of enhancements, and our license for the floating license server updates automatically now. So if you can upgrade that, that would be great. And the other thing is, for those of you who are using floating licenses, now you can define the users that are allowed access to check out licenses for floating licenses. You can define those users using LDAP. So it just makes it really easy to synchronize your user community that you already have defined in your directory, probably AD, with what you allow access to or who you're giving floating licenses to within your company. So it just makes it a lot easier. For a lot of our customers have hundreds of users that are accessing ReadyAPI through floating licenses, and this will make it easy for them to configure that access with a single group name.
Yeah, to manage as well as the group members change.
Exactly. Okay, so some of the other improvements we've made a million little improvements, and some of these seem sort of little, but they're actually ease of use. So we're always working on improving the ease of use. So on the script editor, we now made it easy to change the font size. So Mike's going to actually show it to you, I think.
I'm excited about this
one. So. And it basically, you can just holding Control key down and the mouse, you can change the size of the font. So normal, like what you'd expect. Here, he's going to show you. So, yep, Control, scrolling the mouse button just up and down makes the size change. And you can also put a dark color on the background, so you can turn the whole thing to dark, which is very popular these days. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to be unpopular. So we did that. We also added some better logging. So for any errors, you can find them in the error log. It has information about what failed. So you can see the test step name, the virtual service name, things like that associated with any failures. Can you do that? Can you show that?
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go. So much better reporting there in the log. And the assertions page has an updated look, and it makes it easier to see the results and the error messages. So
right. So again, I don't know if this was very easily called out to you in the previous versions, but we kind of had everything in one single line. So we definitely put some spacing in, so you can very easily call out pass fail. We actually also standardized in the terminology, so it should just be pass fail. Before we were kind of inconsistent with valid. And
we had some inconsistent tags, names on it. So we have actually changed everything to pass or fail, and we've I think aligned our colors.
Yep.
And later on we're going to talk about it, but we also did some color enhancements for people who are color blind.
This is this it? No, this
No,
is
it's later. No,
all
this is
right.
the dashboard. The dashboard's another one of my babies. So
All right.
for a number of reasons, we added to the dashboard the defaults for the how long of data it's showing. We're making it the last 7 days. And the reason we're doing that is because it used to be today. And if you if you start up ReadyAPI in the morning and it's defaulting to today, you're not going to see any results. And it's very unfulfilling, let's say. So we've changed our default. So it will be the last 7 days. So it is sticky. So if you change it to whatever you want to, it'll show up whatever you change it to. But we think that you'll see better data. You'll see more of the value of it if you're looking at the last 7 days than if you're just looking at 1 day. Okay, back to your babies.
The next one is REST Discovery. So it's another one of those underused features, I believe. So REST Discovery allows us to capture HTTP traffic and build tests based on that. And this is something we rolled out many versions ago, and we haven't quite updated the GUI, so we had a chance to do that. So one of the ways you can actually start, in addition to using the wizards through file new functional test, is you can do file new project, and this is where you can access REST Discovery. So if you click OK, this is the section that was updated. So we are going to fire up a proxy listener, sort of man in the middle that is going to listen to HTTP traffic. Another option is you can use the internal browser. So this is where you would gather different traffic. Now, just for demo's sake, this isn't really signifying a real use case. I'm going to browse to smartbear.com. All I need to do right now is gather some HTTP data. So again, I would do that typically through a proxy when intercepting an API client talking to an API server, capture a bunch of data. And then when I'm done, this is the section that was really updated. So we updated all the GUI around here, so it's a lot easier to see what exactly went on. We can see exactly the full response. So you can see headers, body, you can see the full response that came over the wire. You can filter things out. So, anytime you stand up a proxy, anytime you go to a site, you're going to see dozens, sometimes hundreds of different events. So you can filter them out by content type. You can say, for example, just show me JSON content. You can filter out by access code, by response code. So just filter, the success ones. And then later on, you can also filter by wildcards in the URL. And then from there, you can just generate. So you can select all and then generate tests. So again, this is one of those features that if you don't quite know what's going on, there is some API client and someone says there's an API existing, that API discovery feature will really help you. So we've updated the look and feel to make it easier to filter, sort, view, and understand the traffic that transpired behind the scenes. This next one we've talked about. So we reorganized file menu. So before it was file, new functional test. It was just an extra step. So
yep.
We standardized.
There's a big debate internally.
Yeah.
Please let us know what you think.
Yeah. So if if you want some extra steps in the tool, let us know. I'd be very curious to poke your brain and find out why.
I have another one for them to give us feedback on whenever you get a chance.
Sure.
Open up ReadyAPI, file new. Okay, so now on the left, it says file, and you can create a new functional test, a new security test, load test, or a virtual API. So now my question for you is, for the audience, and they can tell us however they want to, but do you realize that when we say new functional tests, we're talking about SoapUI? And do you know that when we say security test, we mean secure? And new load test is LoadUI, and new virtual API is ServiceV. We're not sure.
Yeah.
And so we debate whether or not we should name things all the same, or maybe they should be descriptive, or the names of the product. So
yeah,
whenever you get a chance, you can weigh in on that. We want to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Okay, back to where we were.
Right. Then we also standardized on
We did pass fail. We
pass,
talked
fail.
about that.
Yep. So anytime this passes, fails, undefined, we put in some visual check marks. And then later on, we'll also talk about some additional stuff we've done for colorblind mode. But even without colorblind mode, you might not notice we actually changed the greens to be greener, the red to be redder by default. So hopefully
Right.
it's a lot more, visually understandable. So we've done a lot of behind the scenes work on UX, on research around pass, fail, visual colors around it. We've done a lot of performance and security, which again, hopefully you'll feel when you fire up ReadyAPI. So if you work with tremendous, Swagger definitions or really large JSON responses, we actually updated the whole JSON library behind the scenes, speeds things up. So hopefully you'll feel it in your day-to-day use. We've updated a number of third-party libraries. And this is the JSON path library that I mentioned behind the scenes. So this actually, again, if you work with really large JSON entities, you'll feel it. It's like 3x plus improvement.
It was a very impressive improvement we found. I want to stop for a second. We have one question that came in. So the question is, for composite project option, which is true or false, is there a place where I can default true for new projects? Is there any reason why I wouldn't want to do that?
So, right, this is the property we mentioned a little bit earlier. So any project you create defaults to false, but you can set composite project to true. You get a little C in the icon. It's going to break it down to separate folders. You can then add it to Git or any other version control system. So this is a one-time change. The reason we don't do this by default is, first of all, we have a lot of people. Sometimes people break out their tests into separate projects, and then, it's easier for them to have a file per project as far as management. Another thing to be fully candid, so SoapUI open source will work with kind of a flat project file. It does not work with composite project. So again,
and the idea, I think, is that we don't know how you want to store your projects. Right. And so we are not sure if you want them to be separate or you want them to be all combined into one.
Yeah.
It's really a decision about how you're architecting your testing environment. And so we picked one to be the default versus another. And that's the reason for why.
Yeah.
The next question, can you explain briefly regarding the auto testing integration with Bamboo build scripts on refer any link tutorials?
Yeah. So this question is really regarding automation. So hopefully you've heard that you can automate anything that you build and configure. We have command line behind the scenes, so it's completely agnostic. You can run it in Bamboo, you can run it in any other environment. Jenkins is very popular. We'll send you a link, and for others, if you're interested, academies, demos, our support page, our documentation page can easily guide you to that link as well.
Yeah, we encourage you to, as Mike said, come to some of the training sessions we have. This is specifically focused on what's new in the product. Okay.
All right, so we have.
I can do this. So, so we've added the ability to do a search in the preferences. And we're going to add a lot more searching capabilities around the product. But in this release, we added this quick search. So it's text contains kind of search, and it points you to where that came up, which is great, right? So there's a lot of properties, maybe too many preferences. And so this will make it easy for you to find the thing you're looking for.
Like pretty print that I mentioned earlier, you can just find it like this. So the next one is save properties between runs. So I kind of mentioned this when talking about Git integration. So this is this one. So save project, property between sessions true and false. So again, we see it most often when storing the project in the source control as well.
Okay. We updated our Java library, which we talked about. And another important one is for Hermes, for JMS support. JMS used to require the Hermes the code for the Hermes capabilities, but for 2.3 and forward, we no longer require Hermes for the JMS support. If you have it, it's fine, it's backward compatible, but you no longer have to install Hermes as well when you're installing ReadyAPI. So you'll see that the install no longer has that extra license check in it. So you go straight to just one license. And like I said, if you are using Hermes JMS, that's fine, but you don't have to moving forward.
Right. And if you want to recreate that in another environment, Hermes is still available on SourceForge, I believe. We just no longer bundle and require it for people. Majority of our customers don't use JMS, so for them there isn't an extra install step.
Oh, we also renamed the ServiceV Jenkins plugin. It used to be called the ReadyAPI Jenkins plugin. So we renamed that to ServiceV Jenkins plugin, just to represent that it's for ServiceV, and we will be creating a ReadyAPI Jenkins plugin. So,
right.
So if you're a ServiceV user, which there's a smaller crowd, but and we removed reporting from the top. We no longer have the reporting icon or words, because that used to take you to really just setting up the templates for reporting. It really wasn't the reporting. So you can still set up your templates. You can still edit your templates, play with your templates, do anything you want with your templates. You just do it from the projects tab, and there's the reporting in the dropdown. We just took it out of the screen. We're going to actually make reporting more prominent moving forward. And so we wanted to first move that other thing that was not really about reporting out of the way.
Yeah, and for now you can see this tiny icon that I'm highlighting actually has a lot of powerful functionality, where this is where you can generate printable reports for automation. And I'm stressing this right now. Hopefully you'll remember it. We'll make it more prominent.
Right. But, so we wanted to, we will be escalating that reporting capability so it'll be more front and center. And the other one, which you use much less often, only for configuration of your reporting templates, that one we're putting sort of more behind the scenes.
Yep.
So for the SoapUI enhancements, I think we talked about the AWS Signature authentication support now.
Not yet. So it's another authentication type that we now provide. So when you authenticate for AWS, this is specific to REST. So when you add an authentication, for example, new profile, then we now support AWS Signature. And I might be jumping the gun. We also support OAuth 2 specific to Azure Flow. So there's some new security schemes to be provided, and we encode your HTTP REST traffic with. Again, pretty specific, but if you've heard this come up, chances are you'll need it.
We also added some more property expansion in Get Data. So you can use property expansion in the delay test step. You can also use property expansion in the contains assertion. So feedback from customers, they wanted to be able to do the property expansion, basically get data in those scenarios. So we added that. And I think we made an enhancement. I thought we made some enhancement to the get data, but I think we made the size of it different. Oh, so we made it
resizable.
Sizable.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can move the columns. You can, you can choose something, come back to it. It remembers the sizings. So again, people who need to link dozens or hundreds of different pass-throughs, if you will, then
it was actually also the feedback we got was that it didn't support large field names well. So this was another reason for the rework of the way it works. And you can change the whole size of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So this not only, so you can make it bigger, completely bigger. So it should support your needs without a glitch anymore. All right. So some more on the SOAP stuff. Oh, here we are, the get data.
Right. So in this one, so I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but again, if you use this is something that you might not even feel because it's really meant to be very intuitive. So it's resizable. You can double click things. Before you kind of had to click add. Now you can just double click to select what you need to select. We've also added some of these pluses in the right places. So for example, if you want a test case property placeholder, right? So there could be a new one, placeholder. I can just create it, map to it without leaving the get data screen. And now within the test case that I'm referencing, there's a new custom placeholder property. So this can now have its own value. So we've enhanced get data to make it a lot more usable, a lot more interactive,
Yeah.
you know, memorable.
People live in it.
Yeah.
And we realize that. So trying to make it easier to use. There's some more questions out here. So let me take a couple of them before we move on. Will the pretty print work on WSDL only or also on the test suite and test case files?
Right. So Pretty Print is in the WSDL tab, which is a bit of a misnomer. It's for Pretty Print project files. This one. So this is for the WSDL. This is for the project files. It's in the RON tab. This will work for any project data you save. So REST, SOAP,
good catch,
data source, etc.
All right, we got it for the next one.
Yeah.
You got a Jira story for that now? Okay. And
so then someone's saying, so reporting in Test Runner and from the report button is vastly different. Is there any plan to standardize the reporting option?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised that you're saying it's different, that the user is saying it's different. So there's another default that we've added in 2.3 that I want to bring to your attention. So this is complete error logs, which is on the ReadyAPI, which you can very easily search for. So this was previously not checked, okay? But it's very important preference, which we also check by default now in 2.3 in a brand new installation. So if you're upgrading, I recommend that you check it. Because if you're generating tests here, in case of a failure, so let me very quickly run this to get a failure, you'll actually see the detail of the failure in the report. And if you're generating things in a headless environment, so for example, Jenkins, that same setting will give you the full request and response for any failed data. So again, you can see we have a failure. So this is telling us there's a failure. That's good. Now that we check that option, we can actually see the full message, full request, full response, so that, you know, the reports contain all that detail. So we had this feature actually for quite a while. We just, for some reason,
off. Yeah. Right. I think we're always worried about space.
Right. Space, memory.
Right. Memory, things like that. Yeah. So if this is not what you were asking about, then let us know and you can ask another question.
Yeah. So hopefully this addresses reporting. There's a question about, I think,
existence assertion.
So I think this is a regression thing. So in JSON path exists, there's before, if you had absolutely nothing in the field, like if you had an empty JSON element, that would pass because yes, it existed. Right now it's flagged as failed. So that's a regression issue. We're working on that. We're going to make it behave in a consistent way. So we'll provide that shortly.
Here's a question. Can we default the dark color for the Groovy scripts at the project level?
So I think the way it is right now, so right now it's dark. I think it holds for everything.
Yeah, I think it's sticky.
So if I create, let's go to brand new project, and if I create a, if I create a Groovy script here,
all right.
It's not there. Yeah. So we'll take that as feedback. I thought it did, but the size holds.
The size holds.
So it's this.
We're going to do more even in the next release about maintaining window sizes and fonts and all sorts of stuff.
And then I love the next question. Is there a way to change ReadyAPI themes? I'm taking that as dark theme, standard theme. not yet, but I love the feedback on the whole dark theme and, you know, having it consistent, having it change. So we're listening.
Okay.
Okay, so we talked about get data exhaustively. Hopefully this is just working even better than you expect. Groovy script enhancements.
The
Yeah,
script
right.
debugger is disabled by default.
Right. So so we had a feature for quite a while around Groovy debugging, right? So this one can fail. You can actually say, well, let's debug it. You might have noticed I just did a click. This is going to add a breakpoint so that I can stop at a specific point in the Groovy script and debug it. Right now, when you launch ReadyAPI 2.3, it's faster and better because by default, we're not loading the classes for you to debug. So right now, if you do need to debug, which is a great feature, and we want you to continue using that, we're going to prompt you to restart ReadyAPI, and then you'll be able to save it, run it, and debug it. So this is just, you know, an additional step you need to do first time you debug. After that, you won't have to do it again. So ReadyAPI
if you want it.
Right.
If you want it. I mean, the idea is that we're trying to make the overall experience within the product as performant as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of things that some people want, but maybe not everybody does, and this in particular. So we are trying to default them to not be performance hogs, and then people can choose to turn them on, and they're sticky once they're on.
Right.
If you run ReadyAPI from command line, the debugger is disabled by default on all the platforms. And if you want to enable it, you can add to the Groovy arguments in the command line. So that's just a way to do that with the command line version of it. And you can set it to default, whatever.
Yeah. So if you do need it, it's still there. It's just more of a kind of class loader and startup time stuff. So the next stuff is more related to how we treat data sources, specifically data source type grid. So before, I can't remember if we now skip property expansion, or there's a way to enable it as well. So again, if you're using property expansion within a data source type grid, this is going to affect you. One other thing that we've done that hopefully is going to make it a lot more intuitive is when you reference ReadyAPI, when you reference a preference, I should say, in ReadyAPI, when there's an update to that preference name, the reference will change as well. Okay, so I know this was a bunch of almost word salad, but bear with me. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So in this example, so let's for example say we're going to search for. I think we had a custom, or we're going to create a new preference. So this is going to be, let's do a new test case preference. Pref value 123, create it, and then add it. So you can see this is referencing this preference. So now, if I go and say this isn't a pref, this is actually meant to be temp ID placeholder. You can see I changed the name, and then it should have changed. I'll double check. But so right now I'm going to have to change it as well. So we'll check on this as well. But in many cases, when you update property names, the expansion will update as well. And then the final one was again kind of us changing some default data on test creation. So in much older tests, when you run something, we would gather data. Okay, so this would be a pass fail, and then when you go to a transaction log, you can sort of see what happens behind the scenes. And sorry, the restart threw things off a bit, so just give me a second to reset the environment. But previously, again, for memory reasons, we would actually discard a lot of the past data. Now we're turning that on by default, so you will be able to go in and see what transpired behind the scenes. So for example, here we're logged in. At some point, we encountered an issue. That's fine. When we go into the login transaction, we can see in this case, random data that was generated, right? We can see the full session ID. Before, we would not show you this because we would purge this from memory in order to save runtime memory. Okay, so now we turn that on. And again, before we had a concern that when people have very sophisticated tests with a lot of data, all of that stuff stored in memory would suffer the performance side of it. So one thing we've done is in data source loop, we introduced this option, which now says discard past results. Okay, so now when we go through this, we're going to sort as we're going to store all the past data for login, search, etc. And then when we hit a data source loop, we're going to discard the results out of there. So let me very quickly disable this one. So now we can kind of, in my opinion, have the best of all worlds. So we can go through all the different transactions. We can see exactly what happened. And now this login step no longer stores data because we successfully went through the whole loop, and the data source loop said, discard all the previous results. So we're still managing memory behind the scenes to make sure that, you know, you don't get memory creeps, you don't get overwhelmed kind of runtime process.
Cool. Okay, so just a couple more things. We talked about this already, but we've added colorblind support for red-green color blindness. And there's a special UI mode that you can configure for that. And it's in preferences.
Mm-hmm. It's in UI. I think it's
colorblind mode. Turn it on. It's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it's now blue, and what's the other color? I can't remember.
I forget.
Pass is blue. But anyway, we've analyzed and done our research behind the scenes to know which are the most visible differences. But along with that, we actually put the pass and fail inside it and made it more visible, more easy to see. Yeah, so fail is that color red. It's a different red than we have in the regular red and green colors.
Yeah.
So this is blue and red, but different red. We've added a new FTP test step, and it's if you want to automate any file uploads using FTP, you can use this new test step. It makes it really easy to just upload a file. Everybody knows FTP from the dark ages. So we've done some improved reporting, and that should be in bullet. That should be indented. So the complete error log setting is now default. So basically, it'll include all your information. So what we found is that people didn't realize that it was configuration option, and weren't finding the detailed information about the errors. So this is going to give them that information by default. And if you want less information, you can always turn it off. And there is actually now we display the number of failed test suites in the reports as well, which is actually really important, and we were missing that.
Yeah.
That was actually needed for somebody's automation they were doing on the back end.
Right, because before we would show number of test cases, passed, failed, but we weren't getting into the test suites, and just the way they organized their tests, it was a pretty crucial piece of data that was missing.
Okay, there's some questions outstanding that are, can you show debug info page?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, so let me check if, right, so this is the debug info page, so now you can see everything in here, all the runtime data.
There's a very specific question in here about a particular issue, which if you can email that to us, or we'll try and get back to you on it. It's we can't look at things at that level of detail. In the service requests, the attachment section, can we use get data to place a test case property as the name of the attachment?
Right. Yes. So every field we have either has get data, or in case we missed it, it should run through syntax. So this property expansion syntax should populate at runtime. So if you're using that to put in a file name, pull up a file name, any piece you want to make dynamic, you can easily do that. And if you can't, let us know, because that's the intent within this product.
Here's one. I believe there's a better way to debug. Click on a test case and click step-by-step run tab. I use it all the time for data-driven tests.
Yeah. So I have a debug breakpoint in this Groovy script, so I could have kicked off a debug from here, and I'll double check exactly. But yeah, there's different ways to start debugging at different levels, and it will stop at any breakpoint that it encounters.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
For the
and very glad to hear customers
exactly.
using these features.
Yes, exactly. Somebody else asked about the startup time, and what I want to say is that we have significantly improved the startup time of ReadyAPI over the past few releases. I have seen the reports. I've seen the performance test results, and it has like about half. I think we've about 50% of what it used to be. So if you haven't updated, I suggest that you do. But I think it was about. It might not have been this. It might have been 2.2, but we made a huge breakthrough on our startup time just recently. So I recommend that you take a look at that. And this release as well has maintained or been a little bit quicker than the previous one.
Yeah, and then the last person's feedback is, again, I got around JSON response exists assertion. So we're aware this is basically a regression issue that worked one way in 2.2 and doesn't in 2.3. Well, we're going to push a fix for that really soon.
So if we update to 2.3, then are we able to restore a running older version? Yeah, actually, you can run multiple versions at the same time on your machine. So if you want to update it and then decide for some reason you want to go backwards, you can do that.
Yep.
You can keep both of them there running at the same time. Okay, there's a couple of LoadUI enhancements. So we've encrypted our communication between our cloud agents. So it can be we can now have a connection that's encrypted between the agents and LoadUI. That's great. So now it's a lot more secure. We actually added something after you finish testing. We ask the user if they want to look at the report or examine the errors or view the test run statistics. So we've added this methodology, let's say, at the end of each of every time you run it. Yeah, running the test, that makes it easier for you to know what other things you can do. So I'm excited about that because it'll make it easier for people to move to the next step. And we've done some enhancements around the logging. So you can choose to only log your failed test steps. We can also configure it so that you have all your requests are logged. And it also, the transaction log now displays all the information on all the requests in the test cases. So not just the passes.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of it, when we talk about logging in LoadUI, this is specific to capturing failures. So before you kind of had to massage it to capture this, to filter down whatever failed. Now you can just say, just capture failures. If it failed, put it in this log. Show me the full request response transaction. So now it'll be much easier to dig into, your load data as you hit traffic and volume against your API.
Okay. And also we had some memory improvements in LoadUI as well. So, all right. I think that's about it. We have a couple of specific questions that are really not answerable. Is there anything else in here? And we're actually getting to the top of the hour, which I didn't think we would. So what's next for you? What's for you guys is to download and install if you haven't already. And I could tell by the original poll, some of you are still hesitating. So please do. There's a lot of great new features. Try them out. Give us feedback. If you have any, if you want more information about anything that we've gone over, it's all in our online documentation, which is on smartbear.com. Very, very thorough documentation. And look at the videos. We've got brand new videos and stuff like that. Any other?
Yeah, provide feedback. Communicate through account reps, through community, through our support customer care team.
We're at the other end. We're listening. Believe it or not, we are. I also want to wish everybody a happy Pi Day, because we all know what today is, 3.1415.
It's a big day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And stay tuned. Also, don't forget, there are the Academy classes. Invite your friends and family. Free training every quarter for all of the products that are in ReadyAPI. Please take advantage of it. It's there for the taking. All right. With that, we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your time. Bye, everyone.